Welcome to the United States of America podcast, and we're broadcasting live from Alaska. Welcome, Anna.
Yep, here I am in the flesh. In case anyone wants to know, yes, I am real. Last time I checked, we have a lot of people here in Alaska this year who've come to visit. Niti, one of them, and they all say the same thing. Oh, you're real.
Well, he's real. She's real, God.
Yes, I'm real, and I'm not a citizen, and I'm not a member of a democracy. And there are all sorts of surprising things that we need to learn. And 4th of July is a good time to learn them and think about these aspects of our lives, because this is why we celebrate, is that we're not forced to become citizens at birth, as most people in the world are. We take it for granted that we're not citizens at birth, and we think we're free. However, an insidious system has been developed which registers us as citizens of a foreign government almost at birth. And what happens is that they come into the hospitals after a mom has given birth to a new baby, and they have her sign undisclosed paperwork that falsely states, or can be interpreted to state, that they are U.S. citizens. Now, most people don't realize that the word citizen is related to the word city. And the word citizen means that you have an obligation to serve a government, as in donate your money and your time, your labor, to a government. And instead, your forefathers fought and bled to make sure that the government would serve you instead. So this insidious system, which is related to an even older scam, has been put in place in this country without our knowledge, without our consent, and certainly it's been done in bad faith by some corporate services vendors. Now, these are corporations like the USA Inc. and the United States Inc. These are incorporated entities. They're businesses in the business of providing governmental services. Okay? Now, they have taken over and have pretended to be our government. They've been masquerading as our government, but in fact, they're simply service vendors of our government. They're our employees, and they've been parading around and pretending to represent us and accessing our credit and spending our money and indebting us and blaming us for all of their warmongering and their adventurism and their ill-gotten activities all over this planet. Americans are constantly blamed for being predatory, genocidal maniacs that come in and rape and pillage and steal. And that's not who we are. That may be who the Brits are, based on their own record, historically, but that's certainly not our nature. That's not our character. And that's not what America's about. So if you felt that things didn't quite match up, if you didn't feel free on April 15th of every year, if you felt like you were being harassed at some point, or that your freedom was not what it was cracked up to be, now you know why. And it's time to do something about it. Another point, you're not a part of any democracy. This country is not a democracy. What's a democracy is the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. It's the British territorial, quote unquote, United States that's run as a democracy, not this country. Our country is supposed to have a republican form of government, which is not a republic. Listen to me carefully, a republican form of government. A lot of people don't pick up on this because they don't know Latin. But Republican is the feminine gender word, and it implies something quite different from a republic. Okay? A Republican form of government is best described as government around the kitchen table. It's where the communities come together and they decide things for their own best interest, and then they tell their employees what they want done. Instead, in a democracy, it's a 51% mandate, which they are required to have in order to take an action. So you will see that, number one, our government is focused on individuals and on families and communities, and their government is just grossly focused on getting a 51% mandate, which, ironically enough, despite all their protestations and all their statements about their lovely democracy, they never have a 51% mandate for anything. So not only are we not a democracy, but they aren't really a democracy either.
The corporatocracy at work again, because they don't require anything as a corporation, right? As a private corporation, they're able to basically make any decision that they want. Like Trump is working, he's the president of the corporation that they get to name.
Right.
Yeah. This is what a lot of folks don't comprehend. And when you have our generals and our presidents bending the knee to the queen or the king.
Right. It makes total sense once you realize that these presidents are presidents of governmental services corporations. They're not presidents of this country. When you realize that we haven't had public elections in this country for 160 years, then it begins to make sense. Then you understand why George Herbert Walker Bush was knighted by the Queen and bent down in front of her and had his shoulders smashed by her little sword. Then you understand why General Colin Powell was knighted by the Queen. That's why General Norman Schwarzkopf was knighted by the Queen, and why Henry Kissinger was knighted by the Queen. All these guys work for the British Crown and the British monarch. They're not American.
Mm-hmm. And, the Papist municipal, this is something interesting too, Anna. A lot of folks are asking, how do you have evidence that, the Pope is here, or the Pope or Rome is running, whatever it is that they're running? What is the evidence that's visible for people outside of the jurisdictional evidence that, the all cap, bless you.
Pardon me.
Like how they use the all caps names and things like that. What other evidence? I mean, people are asking all the time, and I'm like, well, we see the evidence in writing. Oh, the average American, bless you, the average, sorry, U.S. citizen, they have no idea. They haven't been educated on the evidence of jurisdiction in writing. So they don't know, like, when things are upper and lowercase, that is a jurisdiction, or if it's in all caps, that's a different jurisdiction, or anything about, like, even the parse syntax and how they've encouraged everybody now to have these hyphenated names and things of that nature. Like, what does that do? How does that cause harm? I mean, it's causing harm, right?
Well, it's a system of organization and categorization that was supposed to be used within and for corporations to get organized. It's not intended for living people. And so it's inappropriate that living people should be subjected to a system of organization and law that is not intended for living people. Okay. I think it's very interesting that during his last days on earth, Pope Francis came forward and just admitted to the World Court and the justices thereof that, yeah, we just made this up. We made up these corporations. We made up the whole legal system. We made up statutory law. And it's all just made up. It's all just stuff that we pulled out of our hats and started using to organize things.
Mhm.
And, at the time that this was being put into place, which is the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, the whole concept of corporations was pretty much foreign to everybody. Nobody knew then what we take for granted now in terms of how corporations exist and are managed and everything else.
I don't know that people know that, Anna. I mean, I think most U.S. citizens, I know I didn't when we were U.S. citizens, but we did not know that we were incorporated. Each living man had become incorporated.
A franchise.
Yeah. And so no one knew that. I didn't know until you told me that, oh, well, you must have incorporated your business, Niti, to, have bankruptcy protection. No, I didn't. I didn't know that had anything to do with it, because the average living man or woman on the land and soil right now, we just thought that that's the only way that we can run a business. It's the only way we can be recognized as a business. The part that's very frustrating, Anna, is that you can't get commercial space without filling out all the boxes. And this is the thing, you guys, realtors, the ones who are managing the real estate for the king, you can't get commercial space without checking all the boxes of whatever your business is. And so the only advantage that I had setting my business up was that I know I have to check these boxes. But, what I was trying to do was create something that was going to serve people who were being poisoned by the food and to help serve the farmers. So I just called it an education center. And it was the only way I was able to get, commercial space. Otherwise, you can't get commercial space for farmers to bring regenerative, not poison food to market for real living men and women. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. But I'm not surprised. Everything about that system has been based on fraud and entrapment. And entrapping more and more of us to serve them has been their entire game. But when the Pope came out and admitted that, yeah, we just made all this stuff up, it's totally fraudulent, then that threw all of it out the window. That basically is admitting, okay, yeah, we made this up. It's not valid. It's just something that we made up.
Well, it's airy-fairy. It's air jurisdiction. It is also, how could they have made it up if they weren't creators, Anna?
Right, exactly. And they did make it up. Now, there are very few things that actually operate as corporations. One of them is a natural trust. And a natural trust arises when, say, I hand my purse to Niti, and I say, Niti, give that to Rohit when you see him.
Okay.
Okay, this is a trust. I'm giving something of mine to her in trust, and giving her instructions as the trustee of my purse to give it to her husband when she sees him. Okay, so I've set some conditions. I've given her something of value that she's holding for me, right? And that's a trust. You have a donor, you have the trustee, and you have the receiver. And that is a natural relationship that has been basically codified and put into writing. And another one is the last will and testament. You're dead, right? You can no longer have any active force in the physical world, but you've left behind a set of instructions. And again, I could turn to Niti and say, Niti, if I die, or when I die, and if you're still alive, I want you to take charge of my minor children. I want you to take charge of my estate and sell my house and give the proceeds to the kids for their support during their minority and give them a college education. Anything left over, I want to go in support of my mother, who is elderly. You know, take care of your responsibilities. And in order to take care of your responsibilities after you die, right, you have to have a last will and testament, which is another form of trust. And this is how these things got started, is this relationship where you have to depend on someone else to be your trustee and to do what you need done after you are dead, disabled, or where this really got started, as in the Crusades, you're going off to a foreign country and you don't know when you're going to be back again or if you're going to get back again.
Mm-hmm.
So you hand off your property and you give your instructions to your trustee so that they will hopefully, if they're trustworthy, right, handle your estate according to your instructions.
Mm-hmm. And your word was bond.
Right.
And that was the way that it worked. Your word was the bond. So these people have actually, what they created was dead corporate fictions on paper, which wasn't even possible before we could write. So this is something that happened after they created writing. Again, we're the creator. So our creation can never stand over us. And at this red hot moment, most people have never had this education, and they've been enforcing these lies with religion. They're using religion to enforce these lies upon the people by blaming and shaming. Isn't that pretty much it?
Blaming, shaming, and coercion.
And non-disclosure, obviously. So you haven't been given all the information, and what limited information that they've given is in their favor, which is non-disclosure.
Right. And so there are two basic things. Not telling you is non-disclosure, and omitting information is another form of non-disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And they use both. There's either just not telling you, period, at all, and then there's omission, where they're not telling you all of it. They're just telling you so much, and that's the devil's favorite thing. If you notice in the Garden of Eden, the schmarmy way that Eve was told, "Oh, you won't die if you eat this fruit." At least not right away.
Not right away.
You know,
it's the poisonous fruit.
It's the omissions that are deadly.
Mm.
And so they say, well, you're a United States citizen, but they just don't pin down which United States they're talking about, do they? And they leave it to you to be ignorant about what the word citizen means, so that you readily acquiesce to this and say, well, yeah, I'm a U.S. citizen, I guess, because you live in the United States. But that's really not what it means or implies. United States citizen implies that you are a member of the government, a government employee or dependent of some kind, that owes service to the government.
Not even our government. Just a foreign government. Not even one foreign government, but two.
Yes, well, and look at this situation we've got with the southern border. It's a really good example. The corporation comes up with an open borders policy. Okay, it's a policy. Who has policies? Corporations have policies. Governments don't have policies.
And they're not laws.
Right, policies are not laws. But all of a sudden, the bankrupt United States government, which is really the United States Incorporated, a foreign corporation acting as a government, which is actually just a service vendor, right? They make up a policy. Oh, it's going to be our policy that all the borders of the country are open to immigration of all kinds, and you can just walk across the border and you don't need to, have any kind of permission or paperwork or anything. That's their corporate policy.
And then they're going to make another policy where they just throw you out whenever they feel like it, also with no respect and no consciousness of the actual living man or woman. And these are, well, speaking of fruit, isn't their usufructuary duty, the story of Adam and Eve is actually about using the fruit?
Well, I see the story of Adam and Eve in terms of a matter of being deceived, number one, doing something wrong as a result of being deceived, and then whether or not you take responsibility for your action. That's how it comes across to me, because I see Satan did wrong, Eve did wrong, and Adam did wrong. All three. Of the three, Satan and Eve both took their lumps. Adam tried to blame his wife. And as a result, the only two competitors left were Satan and Eve. Adam just proved himself incompetent. So the Adam and Eve story comes down to a rivalry between Satan and the woman, Eve. And this is what we see all down through history, is that the seed of the woman and the seed of the snake have fought each other incessantly all down through time. And it has to come out in the end in favor of the woman. And so it has. But it's been a matter of us learning the difference between good and evil, which is what we chose in the garden. Okay? We chose freely, not the tree of life, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So we had our homework set forth for us on a platter. Okay, here's good, here's truth, here's life, here's community and harmony and good fellowship and goodwill. Here's health, here's everything that you could possibly ever want right here. And in this other hand, we have death and destruction and war for profit. We have murder and mayhem and thievery and thugs. We have all the things that are evil we have in this hand. Which one do you want?
Is it the red pill, blue pill thing?
It really is.
And that's what it's coming down to, right? But people don't comprehend, Anna, the lies from the truth because of the corporate religion. Like they've been made to believe that, the sin is something, they've always associated it with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically, right? It's never really associated as it should be with the truth versus the lie.
Right. And that too is part of the great deception that we've suffered here, in that we haven't been given a straight choice. Okay?
Because you don't have the information. Listen, friends, truths align with morality and lies align with immorality. And when you have people walking the line, which right now there's, the fair and balanced people, the ones that are balanced and in the middle, those are immoral people because they've chosen nothing. They're not choosing the truth or the lie, which is immoral. You have to choose the truth or the lie and not walk the line. And instead, the corporatocracy wants you to believe that morality is relative. It's your truth. It's my truth. It's anything, But when this table is solid, you can actually use the table. We can stand on the ground, and we need to be able to walk on reality. You can't walk on this airy-fairy,
right.
nonsense.
Right. And when you make a decision in favor of the truth and in favor of what's good and right and healthy, then you start seeing all the evil that you're surrounded by. I didn't know that. I was 26 years old, and one day I got up and I was looking in the mirror, and I said, you can't go on like this anymore. Mm-hmm. You can't go on playing the corporate game You can't go on living like this. And so all of a sudden I made the choice, the free choice, to stop telling lies of any kind about anything. That, to just, if I knew it wasn't right or it wasn't true, I wasn't going there anymore. And so I made that choice. And after I made that choice, I noticed something really kind of unusual and unexpected. And that all of a sudden, by making that choice myself, I started seeing all of the lies surrounding me. I kind of woke up and went, well, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't true either. And before you know it, the entire web of deception that we live in became very apparent. And so I really encourage you to make that commitment yourselves and test out what I'm saying to you and see what happens, because this is how my husband and I and so many other people became, quote unquote, enlightened, at least about so much of the history and other things that have been obscured and misrepresented, and all the things that we've been lied to about by all these governmental service providers. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you try this, you're going to be surprised, because you'll catch yourself lying about all sorts of little things. It'll be stupid stuff. It'll be minor things that you just don't even think about lying about.
Politeness.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, like, what are the lies? The training that we've received is to be politically correct, which is a lie. Politics is a lie. It's theater, and politeness is a big lie. I remember when we were growing up, Anna, if somebody were, like, if I were to say to you, hey, can you come and hang out and have lunch with me today? And you said, no, thank you, then I have to just accept that. But, kids, and I'm like, but it'll be so much fun. You should come. And I remember my mom would be like, Niti, no, enough. Like, you're not supposed to press this issue, because now you're forced to have to answer.
Right.
And I might not like the answer, whatever that might be. Or you're forced to have to lie so you don't hurt my feelings, which when we were growing up, people just said, look, I like to eat my lunch alone or whatever. I'm not interested in having lunch with you. If you press them,
Right.
too far. And it wasn't that people would take that the wrong way. They would just go, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, pushed you.
Right.
And they would immediately apologize for, pressing the issue, because it's rude and it's not nice to put you in a position where you should either have to lie or hurt my feelings.
Right.
Because that causes harm a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And we're supposed to operate in a situation where we do no harm. Well, you can't do no harm if you're forced to have to hurt somebody's feelings, because they can't take your no is your no or your yes is your yes.
Right. And you'll find all sorts of situations where you wind up effectively lying about something. They've been telling a huge lie about all of you, or virtually all of you, for a very long time, and that is that you voluntarily pay the federal income tax. And they come right out and say it. We have multiple, commissioners of the IRS on tape, in front of TV cameras, in public forums, calling this a voluntary tax system. And yet we all know how voluntary it really has been, with IRS agents busting down doors and seizing computers and marching people off to jail and fining people and, making up all sorts of claims against them and their property, and, misrepresenting people as debtors when in fact they're creditors. We've seen all the ugliness of an inquisition in this country, And we haven't even realized what we were dealing with until quite recently.
Mhm.
It turns out that the income tax was imposed by the Roman Catholic Church as early as 1135 AD in France. And what it was a special tithe taken up by the church to pay for crusades. And the Dominican order, which was the order that was in charge of the Inquisition, so these were people that spread terror in the hearts of the parishioners, came around on when? April 15th every year. And they collected an income tax of anywhere from 10 to 25% for who? The Pope. It was called Peter's Pence. And they have been collecting this tax from the faithful on a quote-unquote voluntary basis, backed up by the Inquisition, ever since. And that's where we get the income tax. It was never part of our government. It was never part of our system. It was brought here as a foreign institution. And when the Brits saw how well it worked for the Roman Catholic Church to be able to arbitrarily squeeze money out of the parishioners, they came up with their own version. And so we have two different internal revenue services in this country, none of which are supposed to address Americans, and yet both of them do. They routinely entrap and ensnare Americans, and they forcibly take anywhere from a third to a half of their yearly earnings under false pretenses. This is a criminal racket, and it's been allowed in this country for what? I believe the most recent successful bid to establish the Internal Revenue Service came in 1925. So 100 years that we've put up with this entrapment and enslavement and the false narrative that this was all voluntary and we all just, stood up on April 15th to a man and all handed over a third of our paycheck. No, this is a lie and this is a crime. And that's why the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service, both, there too, are going away. Now, they don't want to give up this coercive means of seizing a third of your income every year. They don't want to tell you that you actually don't have any income, that the only reason that they call it income is that it's a way of obscuring the fact that they are seizing your earnings. Okay. Income is one of those words that you can't find a definition for. There is only one definition of income, and that was given by the United States Supreme Court, in which they said it was profit separated from capital. And that there tells you in a nutshell that they're talking about corporations. They're not talking about people. They've instituted this whole scheme by claiming that you voluntarily enfranchised yourself to both of these corporations, the British Territorial United States of America Incorporated, which is a British Crown corporation, and the United States Incorporated, which is a Roman municipal corporation. They've conferred a federal dual citizenship on you using a multi-step fraud scheme. And then they've racketeered based on these phony contracts obligating you to serve the government. And that's not supposed to happen in this country. This is what our forefathers fought and died for, so that the people could be free and not have to serve the government if they didn't want to, so that the people could be served by the government instead of having to serve the government. This is what it's all about.
That's what today's about. You know, there's a lot of folks that believe that this is the celebration of us, you know, causing harm to Native Americans and Native populations, and that is not the case at all.
No, it has nothing to do with that. And by the way, our government didn't do any of that. You know, people still, there are many Native people in this country who think that we did it. We didn't. There are lots of people around the world that think that we, the Americans, did terrible things in their country, and we didn't. We were being used as a storefront for these corporations. These horrible, self-interested, profiteering corporations commandeered this country after the Civil War, did it very surreptitiously, very secretly, and they've been using us ever since. They turned our honorable military into a mercenary force for hire. So ever since the Civil War, every veteran who has served has been enrolled as an indentured servant for a tour of duty, during which they are essentially slaves that are directed by these corporations to do whatever is good for the corporation. And as a result, for example, our government does not support the genocide in Palestine. Not at all. Our government is against it, 100%. But you see, our vendors have gone into business for themselves. And instead of raising their proper flag, which would be the British Crown flag, the British Crown Corporation flag, they've been using our Title IV flag and pretending it had something to do with defending us, which it doesn't. Okay? So they've just been a bunch of liars, pikers, and you know, users this entire time, and we have had to suffer the loss of our reputation and our money and our lives in surreptitious service to these entities that we didn't even realize existed, that were in here just wreaking havoc for us and for the rest of the world.
Double crossing us, as is stated on their flag.
These people are not nice people. The British Crown end of it has been pretty much authored by the Committee of 300, which are the heirs of the old British East India Company, and on the other side by the Roman Curia. The municipal corporation part of it was all authored by the Roman Curia. So now we have this president of the USA Incorporated, Donald Trump, rampaging around the world. He went to Israel, and he and Netanyahu are thick as thieves, and they're all intent on opening up new oil basins and new refinery systems to go along with a new canal system on the eastern side of the Sinai Peninsula. Well, they've got this giant, complex commercial thing going on, and they're out grabbing land to support their commercial development. So they went in and they carpet bombed Gaza. They not only carpet bombed it worse than the firebombing of Dresden, they went in and did it a second time, which never got reported in the media here in the United States. Now try to imagine this. They went in and they carpet bombed Gaza worse than what happened in the firebombing of Dresden. They killed everything. They destroyed hospitals, schools, homes, everything, businesses. And then that wasn't good enough. They created more than 1 million refugees, herded them into open-air internment camps, and then refused to give them any water, aid, anything, and refused to let international aid organizations in to help them. So they basically condemned them to death. And then, on top of it, they did another run. They went in and they carpet bombed it a second time to make it totally uninhabitable and so that it could never be restored as a place for people to live without just starting out with nothing but dirt again. Okay? That's what they did. And you think that the American people support that? No.
No.
The American people do not support that. The American government does not support that. And they have been misrepresenting us as if we had anything to do with their nasty commercial business and their grasping and their desire to make use of other people's resources for themselves and for their own profit. These are not nice men. This is not a nice situation. The USA Inc. and the British Crown Corporation and the principals responsible for it need to be held accountable. Okay? And as far as, President Trump's personal affection for Benjamin Netanyahu, that's his problem. We want nothing to do with it, and we have told them so. We don't even believe that Israel actually, factually, has any right to exist. Now, it's not that we don't love the Israeli people. We have no reason to hate Israelis as Israelis. Anybody who wants to be peaceable and who wants to live and have a home and everything, fine. But this idea that you can go in and just kill and rape and pillage your neighbors with no consequences has to end. This idea that Israel has any right to attack Yemen, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, and the Gaza Strip all in 1 year? 2 years? I mean, we know who the aggressor in the Middle East is, and it isn't Israel. It's the, and actually the people in Israel are being played just like the people here are being played. Because they don't want to go out and attack all these other countries. They don't see any reason for it. But who is attacking? Who is acting as the mercenary force? Who is in tune to all these commercial grab the land and kill the people and just, do all of this nastiness? Oh, it's the State of Israel Incorporated, another corporate franchise of the USA Incorporated. And guess where the State of Israel Incorporated is headquartered? Kensington Palace. It's the Brits, I'm telling you, it's the Brits who are at the bottom of 9/10 of all of this, and yet they are operating as puppets of the Roman municipal government. And it's been this way since King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII was in trouble with the Pope, as everybody knows, because he was trying to divorce a second wife. And so the Pope said, no, you got one free divorce, that's it, you don't get to go on like this. And they had a big brouhaha and breakup, and the Pope basically excommunicated King Henry, and King Henry started a Protestant church, the Anglican Church, and made himself the head of it, a position that the monarch still holds. And so King Henry had his own church, and it was Protestant, and yet King Henry was under so much strife and struggle because of his actions that after a couple of years of struggling with a Roman Catholic interdiction, he went to Rome and he met with the Pope. And what came out of that was a quid pro quo, where the Pope got a 60% interest, and all of the non-Catholic souls that were baptized in the Anglican Church. And King Henry got a 40% split. And to this day, they have a 60-40% split on their business, their joint ventures. And you can track this through the banking system. When children are birth certificated, that means they are registered as property and as citizens owing service to these two foreign government service providers. It's a 60-40 split to this day, and I can prove it.
Mm-hmm. All of these corporations on paper, these dead corporate fictions, it's always them versus the living men. There's no man alive that is comfortably sitting with the murder of all these babies and mothers and all of our sons and daughters who are being used as cheap mercenaries are the ones who are having to, or who are being used to do this. And, what do we do about the order following situation? People are brought up right now. We're being brought up by the dead corporate fictions. We're being trained by the corporate fictions. They're the ones educating the living people. And they're the ones that are not allowing them to operate as creator. And they're using religion to enforce this madness, this evil. And when are we going to say no? Most of the questions in the comments, Anna, are all about how to have remedy. Every week we know this, right? And I don't know how many people are actually listening to Anna when she's telling you that you have to use your voice and you have to use your will. Thy will be done.
You have to think for yourselves.
Anna can't save anybody. Jesus isn't coming to save anybody. God can't even get you to choose him as your king, right?
Let me tell you a story. I learned this personally myself. I was out one beautiful autumn day, and I was walking with my dog, who was a big, lovely, loving yellow Labrador retriever. Okay, so I'm with this big, happy dog, and we've had a very leisurely, beautiful walk on a beautiful autumn day, golden leaves everywhere. And we come in from the outside and we enter this little Arctic entry, which is, just a little extension of the house, kind of a mud room that you come into. And all of a sudden, I could smell roses. I mean, this is October in Alaska. There are no roses guaranteed blooming outside. And I didn't have any roses in my house. So I stopped in this little cubicle and, I was sort of startled. And what I had been thinking about as I was on this walk were all of the strange and wonderful things that had happened to me in my lifetime, opportunities that I had for education, people that came into my life at just the right moment, all sorts of things. And it was occurring to me that this was sort of a plan, that there was something that was quite beyond myself that was leading and guiding and opening up these opportunities as I went, and that I had been actually guided all my life. And so I was thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm 50 years old and I don't have any responsibilities. My kids are basically grown or well on their way to growing. What am I supposed to do? What have I been guided for? And so I just basically asked the question, thank you. What am I supposed to be doing? Well, whatever it is, here I am. And immediately, within 3 days, all of this started happening. So, yes, and it came to me as a big surprise that we have to accept. We have to accept our mission. We have to accept our assignment, if you will, in life. And if we don't, then probably you're never going to know what you're supposed to be doing or what your mission is or was. You have to make that decision, and you have to open yourself up to saying, okay, what am I supposed to do?
Well, I think I've had a similar experience, Anna. I remember thinking, when I was having babies, actually, Jonathan and I can't believe that I got my Prince Charming story and all these things, and it seemed like the only thing that was a struggle was, not having enough money or having a lot of resources to do the things that we needed to do. And what could I do to improve our access to resources? Because that was really the only thing that we felt like, that was missing, And immediately, I would say within a month, Meenakshi was diagnosed with cancer. All of a sudden, we were put on this path. And it was so, look, at the time, it was horrible, obviously. It was life-shattering, okay? Clearly I felt shattered, as we were going through all of this. And then, our daughter, we did lose her, but not before she taught me so many truths. So many truths. And at the end of it, I had to take responsibility. If I wanted to move on, because I could really, every day I get to choose, Anna, and every day it's real easy for me to just land in a hole. I could be in a hole, be depressed, be upset, like consumed by all of the losses and all of the whatever. But dude, I have 2 surviving progeny. They don't deserve that. That's crazy. And also, death is a part of life. And I had to take responsibility. Like, what caused all this? Oh, it was my lack of knowledge. And me allowing other people to convince me that I needed them to make decisions about how I was to care for my progeny, for my babies that I, brought into this world. I bore them into this world, and I needed somebody else to tell me what to do about it. No, I didn't. And also, I was stupid, and I allowed myself to believe that lie. And
it's easy to let go of your responsibilities. But with that, you let go of your rights.
Yes. Everybody who's out there feeling like you want remedy, you're not going to get remedy without taking responsibility. So like when we declare, that means that we are taking on the onus of not causing harm either. And that requires us to stand and walk in whatever that's going to be. And fascinatingly, Anna, when I took responsibility, it was the most liberating thing I've ever done. And when I tell people that I was responsible and I won't make that mistake again, and whatever, everybody's like, you don't need to say that. You don't need to blame yourself and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I do. Got to take responsibility. And for me, it really allows me to more powerfully walk forward versus,
blaming God.
Yeah, or blaming, my lack of knowledge. Oh, you can only know what you know. Yeah, okay, well, I'm not going to not know anything again. And so when folks are like, I need this, I need that, and, how are we going to use the indemnity bond? How are we going to do blah, blah, blah? First of all, if you're paying attention, friends, Anna has already written everything. Probably, I think, in the first 100 articles, if you actually read them, and you have to go back and read them and read them and read them and read them again, because it's all laid out how to use everything, how to remedy. This is the business of commerce.
Right.
If you don't comprehend that you are in a business exchange and you want somebody to give, you know what they want, Anna, is they want me to, or you or anybody to give them a credential card that's going to show these criminals that they're, free. And then when they don't accept that credential card, then we have to make them. Well, only I can make somebody respect me or treat me well. I'm the only one who's going to allow somebody to walk all over me or not walk all over me.
Right. But together,
Mm-hmm.
together we make a much more formidable force than just one person standing there saying, wait a minute, I'm an American, I'm free.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at what's already happened. I don't know if everybody's heard about this yet or not, but the driver's licensing is going away. The universal driver's license is going bye-bye. And why is that? Because it was never supposed to be. Because it was never legal or lawful for them to impose a driver's licensing requirement on the general population. If you read the actual laws even, they're not supposed to be putting those sorts of restrictions on our ability to travel. They're supposed to, driver's licensing was supposed to apply to businesses that make their money off of the public roads, like semi-truck trailer, long-haul drivers that are, crossing state lines to haul things back and forth over the, the country. Like taxi services that go interstate, okay? Like courier services that cross state lines repeatedly and often, okay? It's about interstate commerce. That is the only regulatory authority that they have that could ever account for their ability to place a tax or to place a licensure upon anybody's ability to travel in this country. Mm-hmm. So what they were really talking about when all these laws were passed was the business of commerce and how the roads were being used, a public resource, the roads, were being used for private profit. And so they started out with the CDLs, the commercial driver's licenses, and then they just arbitrarily added this whole other roster of driver's licenses on private people who were not engaged in interstate commerce, who were just going to the grocery store to visit their sister across town. And suddenly they have all these driver's licensing requirements and all of these other things that were just added on as an excuse for them to be able to pull you over and, read you the riot act and search your car.
Identify you.
Yeah, all this stuff. And it's bogus.
Right.
And so they're having to give up driver licensing and having to settle for driver education instead. Now, it's fair and it's right that people need to learn how to drive, or as we should say, properly convey themselves on the public roads, okay? But we can do that by having educational courses and having practical on-hands laboratories where people go out and they actually have to do the things and prove that they can parallel park and do all the other stuff. But once they get that little certificate that says they passed that course, that should be it. Mm-hmm. They should now be free to travel the public roads with no problem at all.
I mean, having skills requires education, Anna. And we're not saying that people shouldn't be properly educated with skills,
Right.
You need to learn how to be an electrician. Right. You need to learn how to be a plumber. You need to know the craft of, carpentry or whatever it might be. And so we're not condoning, people go out and be electricians with no knowledge, no training.
Right.
Obviously that's crazy. But Meanwhile, that doesn't mean that it gives a third party, permission to profiteer
Off
on
of them.
our blood money.
Right. Right. These are, traveling is an occupation of common right. It's something that you can do and should be able to do freely. Now, if you're going to use the public roads, you should be educated as to what the street signs mean and what the traffic lights mean and all the rest of it, obviously, for everybody's safety. But that doesn't mean that they can continue to license you as if you were doing something wrong. The very concept of licensing is giving somebody the permission to do something that's otherwise illegal. Well, knowing that that is the definition of licensing and licensure, and the very word license should be setting off some alarms in your head, because it's licentious, right? Whatever you're doing is licentious. It means that it's illegal to do it without this special permission. And think about this, marriage licensing. Since when did it become illegal to get married in this country?
Illegal?
Yes, when did it become illegal to get married in this country? And who do marriage licensing laws apply to? Well, it applies to plantation slaves that were freed after the Civil War.
After we were usurped. Let's just be really clear about that.
Yes, after our government was usurped, the British territorial government came in here and ran their own U.S. Congress, and they promulgated rules because they were afraid that the freed plantation slaves would, basically procreate like bunnies. They wouldn't be able to keep up with it, and they'd all be on the public dole. And so they made these marriage laws, and they're really infamous, and they're still, amazingly, they're still on the books. They're still profiting from this, and they're still creating this false narrative. Everybody who's been licensed to marry is now interpreted as a franchise of the corporation entering into a joint venture with the sponsoring state-of-state organization being a silent third partner.
Again, with non-disclosure. Also, you are a slave.
Right.
Because you were married with a marriage license.
Right.
And so, Anna, I'm looking through all the questions. So I don't think a lot of folks know, like the New York Assembly is asking questions about, reconveying the land, like the sample from New York. Anna has already reconveyed all the land and soil, and it is all protected by the Federation. She's been doing her job. Her job has been taken care of, okay? Also, why are people who are declared, this is what I have a hard time with, Anna, is, if we've declared and we've done everything based on your teachings, if you're listening to Anna and you're seeking her teaching, the 928 has completely reconveyed us over and above and outside of their jurisdiction, and UCC holds you under them. Why is everybody still trying to do remedy as a slave?
I think I can answer that.
Please.
It's because the only kind of courts we have are commercial courts or administrative courts,
which are for dead corporate fiction.
Both of which are for dead corporate fiction.
Probate courts.
Dead.
To manage the dead man's estate.
Dead. It's the kingdom of the dead that we're dealing with.
The zombie apocalypse. But see, here we are, alive. So just showing, you can't appear in their courts because we're alive. Only dead people can be discussed in their court. So we can't even appear. And then folks, Anna, keep going into their courts.
Well,
Even Jesus said, don't enter their courts.
here's the thing. Yeah, try to avoid going to their courts at all costs. Try to, if you need to correspond with the court, do it in writing.
With the clerk, right?
Right.
Notice to agents is notice to principals. Notice to principals is notice to agents.
Here's the part that they are trying so hard not to understand. Once you have declared yourself as an American and you've reconveyed your good name and everything, then you become the owner and controller of your own estate.
Because you're alive still.
Right. Well, and see, they've created all of these public trusts on the basis of just completely bogus suppositions, okay, about you and about who you are and what you're doing here and what country you belong to and blah, blah, blah. They've created these public trusts and set themselves up as your trustees. And that's called, in law, that's called an executor de sans tort, meaning somebody who doesn't have a real interest in any of this, who just comes in and arbitrarily pretends to represent you and dispose of your property however they see fit. It's an illegal, unlawful, and repugnant practice, and yet they've gotten away with it for so long that they just assume that they can continue to get away with it forever and ever and do whatever they like with you and your property, and that you're just going to sit there and put up with it. Well, you can do something about it, and the something you can do about it as the presumed donor of all these public trusts, you can take back control of them. All right? So what happens if by mistake something goes on like this? Remember we were talking about trusts earlier, and I handed Niti my pocketbook and told her to hold on to it and give it to Rocket when she next sees her husband, okay? Well, what if this happens? Niti finds my pocketbook laying on a table, and she recognizes that it's my pocketbook. But she doesn't know me, okay? So she sees this pocketbook. It has my name attached to it. It's obviously got, different valuable things in it. So Niti takes my pocketbook, my estate, and she's holding it, right? She's acting as a trustee, but I don't know her, and she doesn't know me personally. She's just holding on to my estate for me, okay? So time goes on. She looks at the contents of the pocketbook. There's a bunch of money in it. And she thinks, well, I should invest this because if I don't, I'm not being a good trustee. So she takes it to the bank and she puts it into a CD for me, right? She doesn't even know who I am, but she puts it in the bank for me. And it's, held under the name of a business corporation named after me. Okay, this is what's been going on.
Mm-hmm. Because I'd have to create the corporation because she's not here and I don't know her. So I just created it in her name, and then I'm managing it because I'm the signatory on it.
Right. And this is what they've been doing. They've been pretending that they don't know us. Have you ever noticed how when you go into court, they don't recognize you? Have you ever noticed that otherwise they can always find you if it's tax time? Oh, you're going to get a dozen different mailings. If you're behind in anything on their books, you're going to get notice of it right away. But otherwise, they don't know who you are. And it's because they're acting as executors de sans tort. It's because they're bamboozling you.
They're good on the bamboozling.
And so what you do when you end this relationship with them and you declare that, oh, say, by the way, I'm an American and I'm still alive and I'm over here, and that's my property that you have in your care,
Mhm.
even though they're investing in things that benefit them instead of things that benefit me. Okay. I want my property back, and I'm the donor. Okay, so suddenly I get this back, and guess what else I get back? I get back the control of the accounts that they've been managing for me, right?
Mhm.
It's in my name, right? So it was my money, my assets that were used to make whatever profits were made. It wasn't their assets. Oh, and by the way, they used my money and my assets, my estate, to create credit for themselves. Okay? So they basically played a game like a credit card hacker.
Mhm.
They created these incorporated entities, these business entities, and they operated these business entities under our names, and they made profit off of these business entities. But they also generated credit off of our collateral. And guess what? There's another odd thought. The person whose assets were put at risk to generate the collateral also own the collateral, and they also own the interest generated from the collateral. So the asset owner not only owns the asset, they also own the profit coming off the asset, and they own all the collateral interest, all the credit that is being based on the asset.
Mhm.
So now they come forward and they say, hey, wait a minute. We did all this work for you. We invested all these assets for you. And we generated all this credit and made profit off the credit too. And we did this all in your name. And what do we say? We say, well, thank you very much.
Bye. Look, that's the certificate of assumed name document.
Right.
See, they keep asking about the UCC one. How should we do this? How should we do that? We've already done it.
Right.
You provided them with the document. So if you haven't done a 928, friends, I don't understand why everybody doesn't do it.
Well, some people don't need it, but if you don't have a business, you don't need it. But if, for example,
but isn't your household a business?
It could be. It could be. Here's the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
This is all phony anyway.
Oh, because it's man's creation, and we just created it, and it's just like play. Like, this is the part that's so hard to believe, Anna. It's so simple. Actually, what it is first of all, you feel completely foolish not being able to just recognize this because it's so blatantly obvious, right? Yeah. And then you're just like, it can't be really fake because, people are dead and in jail and have lost their lives and there's so much harm that has been caused.
Right.
And that's the sad truth of it.
Well, you have to remember, white collar thuggery is still thuggery. And
and white and blue collar also isn't real. Also, they want the blue collars to be diminished because they're the ones who have the skills to do things. That's like the real work. That's like the real see it, feel it, touch it thing. They're the real creators.
Yeah, right. And so here we are, and we're in this situation where our estates have been seized upon. Okay, that's the legal term, and it's in admiralty. They've been seized upon and salvaged for the estate interests of an unknown person. You're according to them, they don't know who you are. So it's up to you to tell them. And so you have to come forward in no uncertain terms, knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, knowing what nation you belong to, and knowing that this entire country is yours. Otherwise, they will steal it and they will commandeer it and they will make use of it however they see fit. and you will just be another colony of quote unquote Great Britain. All right? Now, we already had this argument with Britain once before. It resulted in 8 years of a long, bloody, and vicious war. And we were victorious. And they are in breach of contract, in breach of trust, and in violation of the constitutions at this point, right? So, when you take back your identity as an American and you step forward and claim your property interests and your assets and your credit back, you also gain control of your vessels in commerce. You reflag your ship, okay? Because these things that they've set up, these businesses in your name, are like ships. They have a home base, but they travel all over the world conducting trade and commerce. This is how they have a separate franchise here, but it should be an American franchise, not a British territorial franchise, not a Roman municipal franchise, but an American franchise. And we have all of the law in place to do that. We have American Admiralty law. We have American maritime law. We don't need the Brits to float a boat, okay? So when you recoup your standing as an American, all your stuff automatically is converted, and it comes under your control, not their control. And it comes under our law and under our law of the Admiralty, not their law of the Admiralty. So this is part of what people don't understand. They see the expatriation paperwork that is part of the 928s. And they see these names that look like their names, and they think that we're expatriating them. No, we're expatriating our property, our franchises, and we're putting them on the American side of the ledger instead of the British side of the ledger. Okay, we're moving our property, we're moving our vessel, we're reflagging our ships, we're expatriating from any presumption that we're British territorial citizens or Roman municipal citizens, and we're upending and coming home. We're bringing our boats with us. All right? So that's what's going on with the expatriation. The Expatriation Act was signed into law the day before they began this entire operation where they were going to claim us and quote unquote salvage us. So, this was put in place as our protection and remedy, without which they could not legalize what they were doing. Okay? So that law has to be on the books, and it still is. And we are still free to expatriate from their jurisdiction anytime we want to. And so most of us, taking a look at the advantages and disadvantages of operating our own operations and taking responsibility for our own lives, choose to be American, because the Americans have a lot of things going for them. All right? We don't want to be British territorials. We don't want to live under a system of colonialism in which our resources and our very lives are exploited for foreign interests. Okay? It's very simple. The choice is, once you get a good look at it, oh, would you like to be a piece of colonial collateral for the Queen? Yes or no? No, I don't think so. Nothing against QE2, but no, I don't choose to. And as for her son, King Charles, I'm not sure he's a king, and she probably wasn't a queen, because actually none of them have been on land since 1702. But, there are a lot of things about this that are just plain lies and things that people are left to assume that aren't true. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have in this country is that we assume things and they're not true.
It's going back to believing the lies and not being able to have the discernment of the lies versus the truth, Anna. So we have a question. Michael Anthony Dowry Jr. Why all the smoke and mirrors on giving the people their estates that you claim you have?
Well, I have them in that I have them on paper. I don't have them in my hand. Now, how do you get the estate in your hand? This is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, the people have to take their individual choice and say, okay, I'm an American. I was born in Wilmington, Delaware, and, my parents were American before me. And so I'm claiming back my American identity. I'm adopting my birthright, okay? So you have to do that. Number one, you have to kind of claim your, I tell people, imagine that for some reason, all the kids' mittens in the entire grade school all got in a big pile in the gymnasium. And all the kids have to be brought in classroom after classroom to go through this pile and find their mittens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is what we're going through in this country. Everybody has to claim their mittens.
And you have to do it yourself.
Right. You have to do it yourself. I can't do it for you. I can keep the door to the gymnasium open. I can make sure that you're allowed to find your mittens.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to find your mittens. Okay? You have to make your own claim. And after that, then we have an entire operation going to recoup the assets that belong to Americans and to get those assets back to the Americans that they actually belong to, plus recoup the credit that's owed to Americans and get that credit back to you. And the only way that you can do that is via a bank, okay? And via a currency. You have to have a currency. Now, our currency, the US silver dollar, there are only about 500 million, that is, silver dollars left in circulation. That's not enough to support the economic activity of 320 million Americans, obviously, okay? But it is enough to support the economic activity of just the few people that have signed up and said, hey, I'm an American. And that is what gave us the ability to stand as a sovereign government as we have. But then we had to declare a new currency that was capable of supporting the economic activity of far more activity by more Americans in order to keep opening up the doors so that people could come home. Well, so then we adopted the AFD, the American Federation dollar, as a gold standard. And then we retained the US silver dollar as a silver standard. All right. Well, we had to figure out all of this, and we had to do all this, and we had to bring it forward, and we had to announce it, and blah, 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 blah. So finally, we have our new currency, which is adequate for all of the people in America to have sufficient funds to operate their businesses. And then we also had to have a new banking system, because the banking system has colluded in all this stuff. The banking system has been rotten to the core for a long time. And you can't go back and fix evil. I mean, there's just too much evil endemic in the system itself to come in and say, oh, yeah, well, now everything's all right, and pat everybody on the head and pretend that we can go on with the kinds of things that were happening in the banking system. The entire SWIFT system, the SWIFT transfer system that they were using, was a system designed to bottleneck the flow of trade and commerce, okay? The Rockefellers did the same thing with banking that they did with oil. If you remember, Standard Oil was busted for a transfer monopoly on oil. And they basically were sitting up there in the command center saying whose oil could go to which refinery and how much and when. And they were using this ability to bottleneck and put some oil producers out of business in favor of other producers whose oil was allowed to flow freely. And they finally got brought to court and busted up. Standard Oil was busted up because of this, because of their transfer monopoly on oil. Well, what did J.D. Rockefeller, the progenitor, head, and top guru of Standard Oil, do? But he moved over to Europe and he got involved in establishing a transfer monopoly on money, which is known as the SWIFT system. And if anybody's had to use the SWIFT system, you realize that they manipulate it for exactly the same purposes that they manipulated the flow of oil. Only now they were, manipulating the flow of money. Well, obviously, we can't just walk in and take over a crooked system and leave it to the honor and integrity of the people running that system to keep it honest. And this is one of the things that I keep running into. And it's the mistake that our forefathers made too, is that I call it the siren song of monopoly. Everybody says, oh, well, monopolies are bad, but they don't really know why. And at the same time, they turn around and when they have the opportunity to monopolize something, they eagerly grab at it because they think, oh, here's the power. Here's where I have the power. I'm going to monopolize this. I'm going to have monopoly power over this. And but it's okay because I'm a good person and I wouldn't do anything wrong. Okay? No. You may be a good person, but you're going to die someday, or you're going to get sick, or your wife's going to fall off a ledge and you're going to have to deal with that. And, there are all sorts of things that happen to us poor little human mortals. And as a result, that monopoly can very easily get in the hands of somebody like J.D. Rockefeller and be abused and used for nefarious purposes. So we don't want any monopolies at all.
I don't think we want any of this. Like, the whole thing is, why can't we just go back, Anna, to, love your brother and do no harm?
If we could do that, we wouldn't need all 80 million laws, statutes, and regulations.
Right. So how do we unbind this? So one of the questions is, how do we reverse all the trust fraud? And this is going to be the last one because, look, y'all, we've been sitting here for 2 hours. And anyone who feels like you're not getting the answers that you've asked, we've discussed it. I encourage everyone to rewatch the video because it's been answered. And if it isn't in this conversation, we definitely have in the last, how many are there? 89, whatever, however many conversations. So we do answer all the things. What I know to be true is everybody's not ready always to receive the answer, and or they don't maybe like the answer, because,
Well,
it requires some work on their part.
Well, number one, it requires some work and thought on their part and taking responsibility for their own stuff and their own lives. Okay.
Imagine that.
But number two, then there have been delays, our banking system. We started out thinking it was going to be just a bank to bank system.
Mm-hmm.
And
on a larger scale.
Yeah, we thought it was going to be a bank to bank system.
Mm-hmm.
And that we'd be able to just
use some of the infrastructure that is in place already.
Right. And invite participation and do it in kind of a community-oriented way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got thrust into the position of having to be a retail facility and to be able to reach down to the level of individual consumers, which is
on the entire earth.
Yes, on the entire earth. And that was like an incredible, exponential, increase in work volume and function and everything. And that had to be worked through in terms of having satellites, having blockchain nodes, having all of the software, having everything set up separately. Okay.
Has somebody else done that before?
No.
Okay, so just for the record.
No, nobody else has actually set up a completely separate system for banking.
In the history of the earth.
So we went from being a bank-to-bank operation to being a bank-to-customer-to-bank operation. So not only the bank-to-bank functions, but then also all of the retail customer functions. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there was the issue of the credit. You folks out there are owed a lot of prepaid credit, okay, because you were giving actual goods and services in exchange for IOUs, and your credit was being used for this. Mm-hmm. Well, who's on the back end of that credit? You are. So you're supposed to be getting prepaid credit that you've never received. That puts us in the position of having to do an entire credit operation to be able to return the prepaid credit to you. You see how the bank operations expanded and expanded and expanded? It went from basically a wholesale level to a retail level to a expansion into credit, which is a whole different realm from banking. Real banking, asset banking. And all of this is all part of your estate, because you have both physical assets like land and money and all the other things that you can think of that are yours that are physical, right? Plus you have credit. And in this case, prepaid credit, because you already used your assets, you already used your labor and your skills and your performances and your land and your gold and your silver and everything else as the asset-backed payment of all these IOUs that were floated on you. So you've got tons and tons of prepaid credit. And we, as a bank operation, had to be able to deliver both assets, meaning physical assets, and credit back to the source, the purported donors of all these public trusts. And that means you. And we had to provide the service. Now think about that.
I mean, really think about that. Because look, I'm telling you right now that there's rumors that have been going around, Anna. Anna has never given anybody a ripcord date. Let me just make this really plain. She can't do that because when you're building something, then
you don't know how long it's going to take.
Right.
Especially if it's never been done before, which it hasn't.
It hasn't. No one's done this before. First of all, no one cared about any of us enough to do all of this. And I find it offensive for you, Anna, and for the Federation who does all this work, that the people with the boots on the ground can't really conceive the gravity of this work. And so I'm just going to say it, if you're not doing something to help yourself and you're not doing anything to help move things along on behalf of your countrymen, which are the people who are on your state, then, you don't have to come and attend any of our meetings. And we don't need to really, we don't need to hear about that. But we are not going to let anything interfere with our mission to rescue everyone. I don't think people realize also, because there's a lot of folks on a lot of the assemblies, Anna, that think they get to choose who they're going to rescue. I think this is fascinating because, if you're in a cruise ship and you're in the water on the ocean and there's living men in the water, I'm not going to find out and do background checks on these people before I put them on the boat. I'm just going to fish them out. And, the danger of that is, yes, probably some of them are crazy people, murderers. They're probably deranged. Most people, when they fish them out of the water like that, they're deranged because they were almost dying. They were dying, right?
They have
And so there's a trauma involved. And so these people are deranged. And a lot of folks have been upset with me, Anna, because I use these words. But it's the truth, you know?
Well, think about it. You've been basically stripped of your assets. Your credit has been stolen. You've been cast in the role of a debtor when you're actually a creditor. And this has been done to you by organizations that you think are your government. And then you wake up and you realize, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is a trauma. It's a trauma just to exist under the conditions that we've existed under.
Right.
But then it's another trauma when you wake up and you realize, oh, look at this. This is really evil. This is wrong. This is illegal. This is unlawful. This is completely wrong. Okay, so people are traumatized when you drag them aboard, right? They don't know where they're at. They know that they're on a boat, okay? That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the responsibility as the quote unquote rescuers to get them the help they need as fast as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Nourish them,
Versus
dry them,
educate
clothe
them,
everything. And at the same time, you have people on these assemblies that are like, well, we're not going to create another nanny state and A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Listen, no, we're not. But, like that basic thing that you have to do to make sure that these people live and don't die, you didn't fish them out of the water for them not to live. We have to make every honest effort, right?
Well, and we're very fortunate that we have a government and we have our law established.
Mm-hmm.
Our forefathers were able to get that much done before it was all commandeered by the evil British government. And I'm not saying that the British people are evil, okay?
Mm-mm.
I'm saying that their government is evil.
We're not talking about the living men and women. We're talking about the dead corporate fictions. And yeah, there are these people that are behind all this creation. There actually is evil involved. And this is a spiritual war between good and evil. And you've heard about it. But, until you actually get involved and solve, listen, and nobody's coming to save anybody. When we're calling it a rescue mission, we're trying to fish people up out of the water. You still have to have a desire to want to live.
Right. You have to want something better. You have to realize that you're not free and that you're owed your freedom. Mm-hmm. You have to realize that you're wealthy and that you're not a debtor. And you have to stand up for yourself and stand up for your rights in terms of getting your claim in place and, helping those who are doing this work. Because, imagine all of the work that we've had to do, quite apart from fending off all the doubters and all the people that were trying to cause trouble for us while we're doing it. Okay.
Throwing arrows, rocks.
Yes. And so, we've carried forward and we've done it all. And, just ask yourself, when's the last time any institution showed up and offered to give you prepaid credit on a credit card that you could spend?
Never.
Who showed up and said, oh, by the way, you're owed a bunch of gold back. Here's your account.
Who's ever said, hey, Anna, I found your purse.
Right.
I found it.
Right.
I held it for you.
Here it is.
Oh, you're Anna. I see it. I recognize the picture in the purse. That's you.
Right.
No one, look, obviously there are people out there that are incredible that have done this. And they're all the living people that do that.
Right.
It's not the dead corporations that ever do that.
Right.
Okay. You don't have any ABCD company coming and saying, hey, we found your stuff.
No, they're taking advantage of your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're marking you off as missing, lost at sea.
Mm-hmm.
presumed lost. And then there's stonewalling and saying, oh no, you couldn't possibly be that person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so all of this is just nothing but racketeering and criminality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's criminality in a specific sector of the law, maritime and admiralty. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and the only courts that you have are commercial courts. You
Right.
got two kinds of
For
commercial
dead
courts. For dead people. You've got two kinds of commercial courts
Mm-hmm.
and administrative courts, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
And they're not going away.
no, they're not going away. But we have our people courts, and we are responsible for raising our courts and enforcing our law for people.
Mm-hmm. And we can do it. It's not rocket science. Listen, Anna, everybody wants to know what the great news is. And the great news, you guys, is look, Anna's real. She's alive. I can she's real.
Yeah, I'm not a figment of your imagination.
No, she's not a figment of your imagination.
Um,
There was a press release by the St. Crown Exchange.
Yeah.
That the gold's been audited. It's somewhere. Where is it? We're not gonna tell you. Why does anybody need to tell anybody? I think it's fascinating that everybody wants to know where is it. And I mean, there's a press release that says that it has been inventoried.
yeah.
These are by the people that you're already considering the ones who have the power.
Right, and we've already been able to recoup $3 trillion in gold. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just a tiny amount compared to what's owed to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tiny amount compared to the credit. You are owed even more prepaid credit than you're owed gold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you are the creditors. You are the rightful owners. This whole scheme is being dismantled.
Mm-hmm.
It's being recognized for what it is worldwide, and the wheels are in motion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
That's the good news.
yes.
The good news is that there's living men and women like Anna who have been working on this for years. And if you're just newly waking up to this, welcome. Welcome.
Yes, the bank has been underway since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it wasn't something that we just woke up one morning and poof, it's there. It started out, as I said, as a bank-to-bank operation. Then it had to expand from that to bank to retail customer to bank.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had to expand into the whole issue of credit, because your credit has to be returned to you too.
Okay, Anna, so when I get my money, then all my problems will go away, right?
No, you're still going to have to rule your life. You're still going to have to take care of your own health. You're still going to have to make all the decisions about your education and your kids' education. You're going to have to run your damn government.
If we don't do that, what's going to happen?
It's going to sink right back into the same kind of racketeering model that we've got now.
And if you guys don't believe that there's evil that are trying to interfere on every turn and wanting to manage all of this, and that you don't have to do anything except just open your bank account, I think that you have a lot more reading to do. All the folks that are bringing all the, the ASNs are still they're all under attack, Anna,
Yeah, and I just received a message about, we've got more than 100 federal workers who are signed up. Well, I've got news for you. Those federal workers were born in this country, and they are Americans, and they need help just like everybody else.
Signed up to hinder, signed up to cause harm.
That's the rumor.
Mm-hmm.
But those federal workers, just because they're federal workers, don't magically lose their birthright.
Right.
Okay. They're working for a foreign government right now. All right.
That they didn't know.
They didn't know it was foreign. Okay. They're working for a foreign government, and they can't hold any office of trust in the assemblies until they stop working for that foreign government. But they are Americans, and we can't turn our back on the fact that, yeah, they were born in New Hampshire, or they were born in Florida, or they were born in California or Georgia. Their point of origin is no different from yours. They have their birthright and they can claim it. They just can't come in and vote in our assemblies and commandeer offices in our assemblies and operate as if they were, they can't operate for two masters at the same time.
Serving two masters, right?
Right.
The house divided doesn't work.
Right. So they can't come into our assemblies as federal employees, current federal employees. But otherwise, these are corporations, folks. Think about it as if the government, USA Inc., is the same kind of organization as General Motors Inc., or as IBM or Raytheon or any of these big corporations, GE, this just happens to be a foreign British territorial corporation, but it's the same exact kind of corporation. All right? And so they have the same limitations and the same processes and the same makeup as any of the other corporations. One of the things I wanted to say is that we didn't have all these corporations 150 years ago.
That's right.
There's been a giant proliferation in cooperatives and foundations and you've got nonprofits and you've
PMAs.
You've got LLCs and LLPs
and we don't have to do any of that, you guys.
No, you don't have to do any of it. And you shouldn't unless you know what you're doing. Okay.
Which no one does because we've not been educated in the ancient law.
Right. You don't know what you're doing. And the attorneys are not going to tell you because guess what? They're already working for the self-interested corporations that have hoodwinked you all along.
The British accredited
Bar Association. Yeah. So, it's, let's take a little walk down memory lane. The Pope has already admitted that they just made all this stuff up, right? So it's all fictional. It's all just basically a cataloging system, an arbitrary business model that you adopt or don't adopt. If you adopt their business model, then they claim ownership of you.
Because you register yourself into their system, and that's the reason why we record things. We are recording historical events, life events, because we're the living.
Right. And so when you register something, you're giving up your ownership interest in it.
Knowingly and mostly unknowingly.
And they never tell you that.
All the business owners out there, the ones that are like, well, how do I run my business if I'm not, incorporated? Well, guess what? You finally get to run it yourself, unregulated. If you want to deregulate, you have to unincorporate. Maybe that should be the t-shirt. Deregulate so you can unincorporate.
Well,
or unincorporate to deregulate.
It's the truth. You're far better off just having your own business, your unincorporated business, than ever incorporating.
Everybody wants to know, listen, when I did that in the very beginning and they said that I was a self-proclaimed governing body, it made it more difficult for me to promote the business. But what I was able to do was have better quality of people that I was serving, and I needed less of them.
Well, another word for a self-proclaimed government entity is a sovereign government.
I encourage and challenge anybody who's a business owner right now to unincorporate. And it feels terrifying because you feel like you're opening yourself up for a litigious threat, but you're already open for a litigious threat.
For a litigious threat.
In fact, you are more open for a litigious threat than I am as an unincorporated entity. And this is really where I wanted to encourage everyone, Anna, today, because, you know, the 4th of July was the declaration. We're celebrating the declaration
Right.
to the king. So why would we allow our businesses to be under the king? Why would we put so like, yes, it's going to be harder for you, you know, to promote the business, to maybe you think get business. I think that if everyone did it,
you'd be free and it would be yours.
And it would be overwhelming in your community.
Do you remember the book by Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged? And there were characters in that book who were like the owners of oil companies and the owners of mines and whatnot. And they were being taken over by the government. And they didn't understand why they were being taken over by the government. Well, it is because they incorporated their businesses. Mm. And most of the business, let me tell you the history of incorporating big businesses. It all started back in the 1800s when a man named Nobel, as in Nobel Prize, found a way to stabilize nitroglycerin as dynamite. Mm. And suddenly people could blow all things to hell. They could, they could build roads and move mountains and dig tunnels and use dynamite to do the blasting power for it, okay? But this also brought about lots of liability for the dynamite manufacturers. Because what happens when somebody goes out with a stick of dynamite and blows something up that they shouldn't, or something fails and there's a huge accident, right? So they knew how to manufacture dynamite, but they didn't want the product liability to impact them, right? So they came up with the idea of the corporation and the corporate veil, okay? So that the people that were engaged in actually producing dynamite could produce the dynamite and not be held individually, personally liable. They wanted something in between them and their personal fortunes and the dynamite company. So that's where the whole business of incorporating came from, is that they said, okay, well, you can incorporate as a public corporation, and the public will take the responsibility, the liability off of your shoulders to the extent that you only have at risk the actual assets of the corporation itself, and your personal assets will be held apart, okay? So that was the whole thing. And then the public owning the new corporation, right, and all of its assets, is in control of that corporation, and all you get to do as the former owner of the corporation is run it. You get to have all the worries and headaches and everything of running that corporation, and exchange for bankruptcy protection. And as you can see, if you're just doing something like manufacturing applesauce or kids' shoes, you don't need that kind of protection because there's no huge liability involved. And yet everybody started, incorporating their business. It was like lemmings going over the cliff, Oh, well, Joe incorporated his business, so he'd have bankruptcy protection. Well, Joe is in the business of manufacturing artillery shells. Maybe Joe needs some bankruptcy protection for his business, and maybe it was worth it to him to give up his business to the public so that, and come under public regulation, right? So that he could have bankruptcy protection for his own private fortune. But for Joe Average, making shoelaces and toothpicks and things of that nature,
baking bread,
you don't need to be incorporated. You don't need bankruptcy protection. You don't need to be a public corporation owned by the state of Alaska, for example. You don't need to be a public corporation owned by the USA Inc.
to go build houses for people.
Right.
to help people, good people doing good things for other good people.
Right. You don't need a license.
Mm-mm.
You don't need 80 million regulations.
Mm-mm.
You don't need all of the responsibilities heaped on you by the federal and state government franchises.
No.
No.
You just need the agreement of the person or the people that you're going to operate with. And you make it plain to who you're working with that you are taking responsibility for yourselves in this exchange and honoring each other. And that is it.
Right. I have spoken to so many doctors.
Mm-hmm.
I bet I've spoken to 10,000 doctors who are living in abject fear,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they want to do the right thing by their patients. They want to be able to tell you that, oh, yeah, colloidal silver can be a very effective means of fighting infection.
And salt is good for you and will keep you alive.
And meat is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And fat derived from natural animal protein is good for you.
And even fasting.
And eggs are good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. That they want to be able to tell their patients
butter is
the truth. Okay. They want to be able to treat their patients in a far better way than becoming basically snake oil salesmen for big pharma.
For the Rockefellers.
Okay. So they've come to me and they've said, well, what can we do? What can we do? We're under licensure. I said, are you doing something that requires licensure? Are you doing something illegal? Well, no. Well, then why are you licensed? Well, because we have to be in order to prescribe medicine. Who says?
Where is the real medicine?
Yeah. And who says you have to be licensed by the federal government or a state organization in order to prescribe medications? And they don't have an answer.
Because they don't know how to operate without it, Anna. And that's what we have to just make plain for everybody.
Let me make this clear. We've got 3 different populations living in this country. We've got Americans, we've got British territorials, and we've got Roman municipals. 3 different populations living under different governments and different laws. The British territorials and the Roman municipals are here to provide us with certain enumerated governmental services, which we should all be familiar with from reading the constitutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's all they're supposed to be doing, okay? They're not supposed to be running our mint. They're not supposed to be accessing our credit and using it for their purposes. All these other things, it's not supposed to be going on, but it's going on because, why? Because we didn't organize ourselves, stand up, claim our birthright.
Regulating our health care.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so getting back to the physicians, what have they done wrong? Well, they've accepted licensure as medical doctors, okay? So they become public officers assigned to these corporations, okay?
Who are military.
This is how Hawkeye and Beach and all the rest of the guys in MASH were conscripted legally.
And they noticed you, that you're part of the military.
Right. It's called the Uniform Officer Code.
UCC.
Okay. The Uniform Officer Code is in Federal Code Title 8, 11, and 31. And it explains that they have, here's another oxymoron, a civilian military. And everybody who's a registered anything is part of that civilian military. And as a result of being part of the civilian military, you get to treat military personnel and their dependents. But how many of you are treating military personnel and dependents?
Or treating anybody, even yourself.
Okay, here's the thing. They can license you to treat their people, their population, but they only make up about 12% of the population. So here's your druthers. Do you want to be able to treat your patients according to the latest and greatest and best? And do you want to have access for your patients And do you want to have freedom to recommend to them what seems to you to be the very best application of your education and knowledge? Or do you want to be in a position where you're a snake oil salesman for Big Pharma and forced to promote certain things like white sales? I mean, you're already seeing it in your offices where you get the flyers and you get the drug pushers coming to your offices and offering commissions on how much of this you peddled this month. I mean, last year it was Seroquel and pushing that to aged patients, even though it isn't supposed to be given to anyone over the age of 65. This year it's what is it? This year they're trying to push gabapentin. They're trying to get everybody to use gabapentin. And all of this stuff is being pushed as a commercial operation by people who've been conscripted without their knowledge or their consent as a uniformed officer, right? And they're being told, you either do what we say and you answer all our questions and you do all our regulations and you report on our surveillance operations to us, blah, 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 or we're going to pull your license. Well, guess what? Unless you're actually working for a federal institution like a VA hospital, you should tell them to take their license and shove it. Because the practice of medicine, like the practice of law, is an occupation of common right, and they have no right to license you at all. You're an American, and you can stand under American law, and you can have your own practice, and you can have your own conscience, and you do not have to serve them. You do not have to be a U.S. citizen of any kind. You are just well and fine being an American national. So let's just briefly loop that around to something else that came up this week, and that is the border crisis and all the people that have come into the country without any kind of documentation or permission or anything, just landed here, okay? We got in trouble because we revealed the fact that for us and our government, immigration and naturalization leads to a new nationality being adopted, not a new citizenship. And all this furor about, ending birthright citizenship. Who wants birthright citizenship if you're an American? You don't want birthright citizenship. And nobody coming here to be free wants birthright citizenship either. It's not even proper for them to be in the middle offering people citizenship before they're even allowed to make a choice about living here and being a national of this country or not.
So this is the problem, Anna. These guys who come here, their nations require birthright citizenship.
Right.
And they don't comprehend that we are only operating in our nationality, like our national status. We don't have to have any citizenship. That is what folks can't get through their head. I mean, look, when they want to migrate here from somewhere else, they're seeking this U.S. citizenship because they don't get it that, just being able to naturalize as a North Carolinian or an Alaskan, or because these are nation states, guys.
Right.
So when you naturalize to the land, then you're naturalizing to the new location, adapting into that new ecosystem, okay?
Right.
And then it's only your nationality that matters. In fact, on America, if you have a nationality, then I don't think that they can put you in jail if you're claiming your nationality.
Well, for high crimes, you can be put in jail, like murder. Any jurisdiction can put you in jail for murder.
Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, on the land and soil, you would be hung.
Right.
For murder.
Yeah. But let's not digress from the point.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're in this country, and we are nationals of our nation states. What does that mean? Well, we're Californians, we're Texans, we're Wisconsinites, we're Minnesotans, we're Floridians, we're New Hampshiremen, we're New Yorkers, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's our actual nationality. That's the demonym that connects to us as people, okay? The citizenship, U.S. citizenship, is by its nature foreign, okay?
It's incorporating into the government.
Right. You are now a government worker, and your family are dependents of the government if
Right.
you accept U.S. citizenship. So most people, if you think about it as ports of entry, most people now enter this country through U.S. citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they come here, they undergo a course of education, they improve their language skills to a point where they can get along, and then they're all herded into a big office, and they raise their right hand and they swear allegiance to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but they're swearing allegiance to a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And to a foreign government, foreign to this country, okay? So they're sort of like in a foyer. They're like in an entryway, an Arctic entryway, say, where they're not any longer a part of their old country, but they're not really a part of the new country either. They're in this servitude to these foreign corporations status.
On the ship.
On the ship. And you can come ashore and you can look around and decide where you want to live. And you can stay there for a year and a day. And then you can raise your hand and say, yeah, I want to be a Californian.
Mm-hmm.
Or I want to be a Wisconsinite.
Mm-hmm.
And you can publish this, and you can do your declaration. You can record it in writing, in public.
Anywhere.
Right.
Even on a prison bathroom wall.
Yes, we have had a couple of cases where people were so desperate that they did that.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is because Canada is saying, where do we record it if we can't do it on the LRO? And I'm like, Anna has talked about this ad nauseum. You can publish anywhere publicly. They used to go scream it out on the town square.
Yeah, and people for many years would just put it in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just a little blurb, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that one of those tiny little personal ads, you know. I, Dominic Rivera, am adopting California as my house, home, and domicile effective September 1st, 1960. My return address is blah, 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 in care of box 457, Carmel, California. And, you know,
Boom.
And you have to give notice to the public around you locally that you're moving in and you want to be considered a Californian or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give people an opportunity to know that you're doing that. And once you join, you have to live your life accordingly. You have to, you know, bear your loyalty to this country, right? You have to fit into this particular culture. I mean, if the official language of California is English, you better learn English because you are adopting a new country, a new nation. And that new nation is adopting and being responsible for you. So it's all very commonsensical. But coming through the U.S. citizen gateway is only one way of actually becoming a national of your state. Now, we have a lot of very pitiful situations where people have been living here for decades and building homes and families and businesses, and they haven't been able to actually come here. They haven't been able to achieve that magic status of being able to be here on a permanent basis, whether U.S. citizens or not, okay? And this is a travesty. And it's only been possible because our government hasn't been that active. I mean, we don't have offices on every street corner saying, oh, well, if you want to become an American national, here's how you do it. Okay, so that hasn't been common knowledge. But you can become an American national without the benefit of U.S. citizenship. And you can become an American national simply by living here for 7 years and a day without using public assistance and without committing a felony. Okay? That's it. That's our public law on the matter of who's eligible and who's naturalized. It's a different process of naturalization, and it results in a different end because you're not going through the citizenship route at all. You're just coming straight across from one nationality to a new nationality. So our naturalization process results in you adopting a new nation, a new nationality. Their naturalization process involves becoming an employee or dependent of either a commercial corporation or a municipal corporation.
Mm-hmm. Which is code for slavery.
Indentured servitude or slavery.
Yes. I think that we've covered a lot. It's a lot. And I think that, it is a holiday. I'm sure people want to, go manage their parades.
Eat your barbecue, get your blueberry pie,
The fireworks. I mean, so on Alaska, it doesn't even get dark until like midnight. When do you do fireworks, or do they?
We save up our fireworks mainly for the winter, for the New Year's celebration, because it's just not as impressive against blue skies. And also because we often have fire danger here in the summer. And so we don't do as much fireworks, but there will probably be a nice fireworks display very late at night, maybe midnight.
Meaning like between 1 and 3:30 a.m. because it's like the only really dark time.
Right. And of course the kids get out and they let off, sparklers and that sort of thing. But really in Alaska, the big fireworks displays come in the winter.
Yeah.
And they are fabulous.
I bet they're incredible, in the dark against the white mountains and snow and everything everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's spectacular. And it probably is reflected off of all of those.
Oh, it's
mountains.
It's just magical when we get a big fireworks display in the winter.
I just, we've really enjoyed this week here, Anna. It has been like literally walking through a fairy tale. And I was telling Anna that when you're walking through Alaska, you're surrounded by these huge mountains, and at the same time they don't seem big at all. It's very strange feeling because they're very big, and you're so small in one moment, and then in another moment you get a different perspective, and it just feels like they're so small and they're not really that big. And
it's the scale of everything.
Yeah,
the scale is strange here. It takes a while to get used to it. But then when you go anywhere else, it's wonderful to visit, but you want to come home.
I mean, I get it, because everything here it feels magical, basically. Like it's just.
I fell in love with the people.
Yeah, the people are incredible. So kind, very, very hospitable, extremely laid back.
And practical.
Very practical. And diverse. The diversity here is so fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have people from all over the world here all the time. And it makes for a very cosmopolitan atmosphere, but very small townish too.
Yeah. So
it's a land of great contrasts.
And you can experience it in a very it's been really magnified for us. I think that's the way to say for this week. Everything's been magnified. And so it's a lot to process, and we haven't really slept very much. But interestingly, we don't feel deprived of sleep. It's real weird.
Well, the sunshine has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
You know, the sunshine in the summer here just sort of seduces us into being more active and more energized, and we feel good. We just plain feel good all summer long, and that makes up for the dark days of the winter, which are, you know, incredibly dark, and it's a long, long period of time that it is dark. But yeah, this is the Magic Kingdom, if there ever was one, in terms of you know, the scale of the landscape and the warmth of the people. This is a wonderful place. I've seen other landscapes in the world that are staggering too, but the reason that I wound up settling in Alaska was that it was just the people. The people are just great.
Yeah. And I mean, talk about diversity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I mean,
I forget how many different native tribes we have here, but it's something like in the 60s or something. It's a large number of different native groups that populate this entire state. And then we have, of course, we've got people from every other state of the union and every other country. So yeah, it is a very diverse and very rich, culturally rich environment. Lots of different traditions, lots of different celebrations and different styles of clothing, and you know, wherever you look, there's something new and wonderful. And as Shannon says, even on a bad day, if you just look at the landscape around you, you're bound to be inspired.
Oh yeah, you will be humbled and inspired in a blink of an eye, in every direction, all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful place, and we're very blessed and lucky to live in this particular environment. The whole thing about Canada, I don't want the people of Canada to feel like they're being encroached upon or threatened by Mr. Trump. Remember that Mr. Trump is the president of a corporation, and when he's talking about Canada, he's talking about the Canada Corporation. He's not talking about your country as a living, breathing, physically defined country. He's talking about the corporation calling itself Canada, okay? And that those corporate franchises are deeply in arrears. And that's what he's talking about. Is the USA Inc. has a corporate franchise called Canada Inc., and Canada Inc. owes us like $100 billion a year. And by us, I mean the British Territorial Corporation calling itself, okay, it's not us, Americans, it's their corporation that's talking to their franchise. And they've all been operating as governments, even though they're not really the government. They're governmental services vendors is what they are. They're subcontractors of the actual government. All right, so once you get that all clear in your head, you can understand where Donald Trump is coming from when he's saying, hey, Canada, you owe us $100 billion every year. Why is this, you know? And why do you have these big, strong tariffs against products from the United States of America when we don't have those kinds of tariffs against you? Okay, so as a business issue of the parent corporation talking to a franchise corporation, it's a whole different communication than what you're assuming. You're assuming that it's the United States being the country, being a bully toward Canada, a country, and that isn't what's happening. Okay, I want everybody to understand that. And, you know, it's the same thing with Donald Trump putting tariffs against China. He's not putting the tariff against the country. He doesn't have any authority or ability to do that. Our country is not putting a tariff on China. Okay? And you have to be able to think about this in terms of, here's this corporation, and what are they doing with these tariffs? Understand that tariffs are taxes. Okay? There's no difference between a tariff and any other kind of tax, except it taxes you in a backdoor fashion. Okay? What happens? Mr. Trump puts a 30% tariff on French champagne. Okay, instantly, the French farmer and the French government go, okay, well, that increases our production cost by 30%. We're going to pass that on to the consumer. Okay, so the consumer is paying that tariff. And you're the consumer. If you want French champagne, you are now going to have to pay $90 a bottle instead of $30 a bottle. Okay? So the consumer is paying for this tariff either way. But what it does do, it allows the USA Inc. to make a whole lot of money really fast. Because they get to glom onto that tariff and pass it on to you in the form of increased cost of everything that you're buying that comes from outside this country. That's what's happening.
Which is everything, because they've stubbed it out to everybody, and they don't let, I remember when we used to make our own sheets and fabrics and, furniture. So we need to get our assemblies up, get back to, managing our own resources.
Business.
Yeah.
Right. Another way to look at all of this is that we had a nice store and we walked out one day and left it in the management of our employees and then haven't walked back through the door in 160 years. Of course things have run amok. Of course the employees have managed it for their own benefit and not for ours. Mm-hmm. Of course the employees are crooked as dogs' hind legs. Many of them, not all of them. But, what can you expect if you're not taking responsibility for managing your own affairs? And if you're not educating yourself to be competent to manage your own affairs, then somebody else winds up taking care of everything for you. And if they're going to take care of everything for you, well, then they're going to rule over you and tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it, because you're not doing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And it's like everything, right? Like the thing that's so crazy is that it's all that anybody's ever known for the last 150 years. So, they've never seen us. It was their fathers and grandfathers and whomever who started the businesses, and they've never met anybody. They're going to challenge us, you guys, because they're not going to just hand over the corporation to, a stranger.
Enough of them have now researched this for themselves, so that tide is turning. Mm-hmm. I have relatively good intelligence telling me that the American military now understands what happened.
Wow.
That's crucial.
That's huge.
I have other indications. The move to get rid of the driver licensing is to correct something that's basically illegal. Mm-hmm. Okay, the move to get rid of the IRS is also to correct something that's basically illegal. Mm-hmm. Just in case you ever wanted to know, the fact that, I've told you that the Internal Revenue Service and that tax and everything is foreign, has nothing to do with us Americans. It has to do with the people that are employed by these corporations, these governmental services corporations. It was never ratified by our states. So it's by definition not legal in our states for them to collect internal revenue taxes that's internal to them, not to us. Okay? So the move to get rid of the IRS is another correction of an illegal situation. They could continue to argue that they had the right to impose a tax on their own employees and their dependents, okay? But even there, they're on very shaky ground because a payroll kickback tax is illegal. So thus far, they're moving toward just getting rid of both for everybody.
That kickback tax is bad.
Yes.
It's a big, big problem. It's the reason why we're getting messages, just by the way, from a lot of the states that are like, we can't, they're trying to come after us for state taxes. It's difficult on a lot of states, everybody, to get out of the state taxes, especially the employers. If you're especially working for one of the large companies, if you're working for pharmaceutical, if you're working for a hospital or whatever, these people, you can't get out of a lot of the local taxes because of just their HR is so ignorant.
Well, there's that, but they're trying to pass themselves off as us.
Right.
And they're not.
Right.
So if you're going to run a state-of-state incorporated franchise, you have to realize that nothing that you are doing applies to the Americans except those 18 enumerated services that you're supposed to be providing.
Right.
So,
well, Anna, we're going to wrap it up. But the next time that, I think the next week, hopefully, well, it won't be next week. Within 2 weeks, we want to get an update for you about all our testing on North Carolina also.
Good.
So we did the next round of testing. I don't have to write a report and get it to you, but it's still not good.
No, it won't be for a long time, unless real serious money is poured into remediation.
Well, Billy Bond and Dr. Will and those guys have a solution. The solution is working. We have the testing that can show evidence of that. Again, it's corroborated with, 2 labs. So the good news is there's a solution.
Yes, there is a solution, and there's a solution to COVID-19. Whether or not we can get to it fast enough, or if we can delay its ill effects enough, is another question.
Right. Also, people have to want to have the remedy, and they're going to have to, like everything, you have to take care of yourself. And a lot of people don't want to do the things that they have to do to remediate their health, as we well know.
Well, I think it's wonderful that we've made the progress that we have. I think everybody should feel very encouraged. I think we're on the brink of being able to provide both the credit service and the asset-backed money service. Which will come first, I don't know. It's just kind of a race to the finish line. But you're going to be glad that you stood up and said, hey, I'm an American. And as time goes forward and you reclaim more of your rights and prerogatives and assets, you're going to be even more glad that you stood up and claimed your birthright. And at that point, you're going to look back and you're going to say, oh, I guess Grandma knew what she was talking about.
I mean, people should have been able to start experiencing that already. If you actually comprehend the documents and you know how to stand on your square,
right?
A lot of people were asking, how can we do this about the business? So on Saturdays, I'm doing the education for business owners. It's focused on farming, but
any business will work.
Any business works because, farmers are the ultimate tradesmen because they are the plumber and the doctor and the veterinarian and, the electrician. They are doing it all.
And even registered professionals.
Yes.
Even people that have been entrapped in this uniformed civilian military capacity. Even you can get out of the gridlock.
Lies. The lies.
Yes, you can get out of the lies too.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people who don't practice at a actual federal facility, it's pretty easy
Mm-hmm.
in that you can hang a disclaimer in your office and, do a very quick question answer on your your initial payment and patient paperwork,
Mm-hmm.
and just making it clear what a U.S. citizen is and isn't.
Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a federal employee? Are you a declared American? Or just,
and then stand ready to explain what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find that in most cases, your clientele is around 90% American
Mm-hmm.
and maybe 10% federal. And then you just put up your little disclaimer saying, I'm not licensed to treat federal employees. Federal employees seeking my assistance do so
At your
own risk.
Buyer beware.
Okay, so that's how you get out of the whole business of being a uniformed officer. And for most physicians, it's a very viable way to run a private practice.
And there are plenty of people who are seeking healing that want your help and need it too.
And as for the issue of prescribing prescription medicines, I will point out that the federal government and its franchises have no ability to just say that something is a controlled substance because they have a limitation. And their limitation is that they have regulatory powers over alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And firearms, by the way, is defined in the law as big armaments like cannons and artillery and howitzers and things that are way bigger than, your pea shooter
or your concealed
rifle.
Carry, arms.
Right. They don't actually have any regulatory power over those at all, and neither do their state franchises, and neither do their state trusts.
Mm-hmm.
So, they've just been usurping power right and left to gain coercive power over people and entire professions. And they've been doing all of this without any legal or lawful basis. So be aware. You're living in a world that is constructive fraud for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Big Daddy Longlegs, anybody who wants to get started in learning, I encourage you to come to the Saturday Zoom call because you can ask questions and we can answer them for you real time there.
Right.
And then, you can at least get started with the very, very basics. Okay?
And please, guys, realize that at this very moment, officers of the World Court are examining our affidavit or testimony of probable cause. Our little book, something is wrong when an American affidavit of probable cause is there available. Last time I looked, it was like $16
on Amazon.
On Amazon. And this was intended as a primer. It's written in really big type. It has all sorts of cartoons. It's meant to be something that anybody can read above a child, and it has tons of information. It gives you the big picture from which you can then learn more. Mm-hmm. And I have an entire searchable database based on over 5,000 articles at www.annavonrights, that's REITZ, rights.com. And you can go there and search the database for topics. Say that you are interested in citizenship, and it'll bring up all the articles that are about citizenship. So you've got a tremendous resource there.
Mhm.
and for all of the assemblies that are struggling with setting up your courts. You've got tremendous resources. You've got wonderful resources from Kevin Annett and his whole organization, the International Tribunals, the Crimes of Church and State. You've got wonderful resources from Brett Winters, who wrote The Excellence of the Common Law.
Mhm.
You've got wonderful support now. You've got an entire comprehensive set of law books by James Parker Hall that is a compendium of every kind of procedure and law that's American law, at your fingertips. Amazon has republished this entire series, so it's available in quality paperback. And you can also do what we did, and that is get a copy of it, just a used elderly copy of it.
Mhm.
So this was a series that was basically published for correspondence school law students back in the turn of last century, 1909 era. So this is a invaluable compendium of the American law, as the American law has been practiced in the past, and it gives you directions about all sorts of things, not only what the law actually says, but how it's administered in American courts. And this was published within about 50 years of the corporate takeover. And so it's still very true to form.
Well, the link tree is in the show notes on every single episode, so that you can find all the stuff that Anna's talking about. And I think that's it. I think we did it. Hey friends, we'll be back next week on Tuesday at the same bat time, same bat channel, or normal time of 12 noon Alaska time, and that's 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and all the rest in between and around the world. And we are, we really send all our love and wishes and prayers out to everybody. Let's all get our court stood up.
And congratulations to Niti and her family for making the big jump and coming all the way to Alaska and suffering all those hours on an airplane. It was exceptionally strong of them to do that, and showed a lot of initiative. And she can now vouch for me that I'm real.
She's real. And it's a thrill for us to be able to record live. So thank you, Anna, for your time today. And
thank you.
Your hospitality, the Federation's hospitality while we've been here. I mean, I don't have any words to thank you enough for that. So we appreciate it.
Well, we tried within our limited time and resources anyway. We do get quite a few visitors, and we're not always able to do what we'd like to do and go out and talk and schmooze and have fun. This past week has been very hard. We've had 2 major court battles going on. We've had a lot of research and a lot of documentation we had to produce for those court issues. And we've had some major estate and trust settlements going on as part of the recoupment process, where we actually have to go out and find American assets and reclaim them because they've been invested by these executors to solemn tort all over the world. So we've had all sorts of work doing this whole past week. And I'm sorry I didn't have, time to really spend the way I would like to spend with Niti and her family, but we got in some licks, and Shannon was able to take them on a whole day tour, and it was good weather, so I'm sure they had a very nice vacation out of it.
Oh my gosh. It was an opportunity, a chance of a lifetime. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Happy to see them all here.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next Tuesday.